evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, I need to acknowledge the Florida Humanities support. This program is a partnership between the Florida Humanities, Friends of Wakulla Springs. Funding for this program was provided by Florida Humanities and sponsored in part by the State of Florida Department of State, Division of Arts and Cultures, and the Florida Council on Arts and Culture. To learn more about Florida Humanities, please visit floridahumanities.org. Let me stop share here. And let me welcome Cynthia Barnett. Cynthia, hi. We're so happy to see you here. You're muted.
Thank you so much for having me. Really great to see you.
Yeah. And let me just give you a quick intro. Listen, Cynthia is an award-winning environmental author and journalist who has reported on water and climate change around the world. Her latest book, The Sounds of the Sea, which is why we're here, Seashells and the Fate of Our Oceans, was named one of the best science books of the year by NPR's Science Friday, one of my favorite shows, and one of the best nonfiction books of the year by the Kirkus Review, Tampa Bay Times, and many others. Cynthia is also the author of water books Mirage, Blue Revolution, and Rain, A Natural and Cultural History. Long listed for the National Book Awards and a finalist for the PEN E.O. Wilson Literary Science Writing Award. She's written for National Geographic's, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Wall Street Journal, the list goes on, Atlantic, Discover, Politico, Orion, Indice, and many, many other publications. Her numerous journalism awards includes a National Sigma Delta Chi Prize for Investigative Magazine Reporting. She earned her bachelor's degree in journalism and master's in American history with a specialization in environmental history, and was a Knight Wallace Fellow at the University of Michigan, where she studied freshwater science and American water history. She is an environmental journalist in resident at University of Florida College of Journalism and Communication in Gainesville, where she lives with her husband and teenagers. Cynthia, this is just, we're absolutely thrilled to have you here. And I am going to turn this whole virtual platform over to you. And I'm looking forward to the presentation, okay?
Okay, thank you so much, Renee, for that kind introduction. Thanks to Friends of Wakulla Springs and the Florida Humanities for sponsoring this talk. I only wish I could be with you in person, but I think we're going to have a great night. I'll leave time for questions, and then I will blow all your minds with my version of the virtual book signing. So I'll tell you about that at the end. So what I think I'll do is share my screen so that I can show you the slides. Can everyone see that okay?
Cynthia, I see that great. Let me get a visual from someone else. You got that good? Yes, we're good to go. So I'm going to go on radio silence and let you have the platform, okay? I'll see you on the other side.
That sounds good. And I just want to say, I probably won't be looking at the chat while I'm giving the talk, but I will take a look at the chat as soon as I'm finished. So if anyone needs to tell me anything, if I'm not sounding right or something like that, if you could come on and tell me so I know, just in case I miss it in the chat. So I just thought I would start by telling you a little bit about how I came to write this book. I was giving a talk on one of the water books at a small museum on Sanibel Island called the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum. And after the talk, I was out to dinner with the director, and she told me what I thought was a really disturbing story. They had surveyed visitors to find out how much visitors already knew about seashells. And these are mostly tourists visiting Florida with their children. And the survey showed that 90% of their visitors had no idea that a shell was built by a living animal. Most people thought they were rocks or stones. And that just bothered me so much. I tossed and turned in my bed that night and I couldn't fall asleep. And I think by the time I finally did fall asleep, I knew I would write this book, because it seemed to me such a metaphor for other things, right? It's kind of a metaphor for the ocean itself. And of course, this is a beautiful queen conch, which you all may recognize. It seems to me that just as we loved seashells, we've always loved seashells for their incredible, beautiful exterior rather than the life inside. And here is the animal, the little conch eyes poking out the bottom. And of course, this is what a queen looks like on the bottom of the sea. It's kind of covered with a wonderful green fuzz and doesn't have its pink glow. But just as we've loved seashells for that beautiful exterior, rather than the life inside, it seems to me that that's also how we've loved the oceans. We see the oceans as the beautiful backdrop of life, but we don't really see them as the source of life or necessarily understand what's happening beneath the waves. Even pollution can be invisible. Of course, ocean acidification and some of the other things that are happening to the sea are invisible as well. So I really like that as a metaphor to build a book around. The other metaphor I love as an environmental writer, of course, I'm drawn to the mollusk for the metaphor of listening, right? We've always listened to seashells. We've held seashells up to our ears to seek wisdom in their polished whorls. And what was really amazing all throughout the book is the extent to which they come forth with these really clear truths about the world around us, even in murky times. So I'll give you a few examples. And I wore my ammonoid necklace for you, my ammonite necklace. I'm not sure if you can see it, but so extinct creatures like the spiraling ammonoids gave fossilized proof of evolution when that was still a very controversial idea. Seashells on mountaintops told a story of shifting continents and rising and falling seas, articulating an Earth history far older than the 6,000 years suggested by the Bible. These cockle shells with round holes in the top were stashed in a Neanderthal cave in Spain. They were collected empty for reasons that were fundamentally aesthetic and not for food. And so finds like this have helped modern archaeologists and anthropologists overturn 2 centuries of assumptions and poorly conceived science that our Neanderthal ancestors were dim-witted brutes. So I love this idea as seashells as fact checkers. So if you've started the book, you know that I open with those Neanderthal shells, and I imagine that they are, I imagine them being collected by a 5-year-old girl, because that was my daughter's age when she started loving collecting seashells here on the Florida coast. And that's, you know, there's something so fundamentally aesthetic about seashells that really pleases the brain. And it has to do with the beauty, of course, their patterns and flourishes, their textures and colors. But I think it also has to do with memory. So starting with that long arc of human memory and pre-humans, really, when you think about how long we have loved seashells. And then I think too, extending to our own memory on the beaches of childhood, either with our own children or thinking about our grandparents. So this idea of bringing people together around a beloved object, particularly across generations, is something that's important to me as an environmental writer. And it's also something that is known, you know, there's a lot of communication science out there And we know that generational ideas are very powerful for readers. So I'm pretty strategic in the way I go about my work as an environmental reporter, to try to draw broader audiences and not just preach to the choir, as it were. So in fact, seashells are the earliest known keepsakes found in graves. This small cone shell, Conus abreus, still holds its rose-colored tint after 75,000 years interred. The stubby cone was unearthed from a grave of a 4 to 6 month old infant in a large rock shelter in South Africa known as Border Cave. So it had been notched by hand and strung onto a pendant and worn for many years before being placed with that Stone Age baby. And I just find that, I found that so powerful and poignant, you know, to think of the profound importance of shells as talisman and so many other things throughout history. So seashells were jewelry before gems were. They are the oldest jewelry known. These are some ancient olive shell jewels, and they were money before coins. In the summer of 2019, my teenage son and I traveled to the Maldives and on to West Africa to follow the route of the first global money, which is an incredible story and one of my favorite stories in the book. You might have heard the cryptocurrency guys saying that crypto is the first global money, but I can assure you that the first global money was not cryptocurrency, but money cowries, which also have the word crypto in their scientific name. They're cyprea, and the word itself stands for like a hidden place. And these were really important money. There's also, they were traded around the world for more than 1,000 years. There's also a very dark side to the story of cowries, and that is that cowries purchased an estimated third of the enslaved Africans who were forced to the Americas. And that story really allows me to tell what I feel is the book's most important meditation, and that is that we will not be able to fix environmental problems without also writing, and without first writing human injustices. So that's definitely a theme in the book, and in some of the reporting I've been doing since the book was published. And of course, I'm giving you these brief little stories. Many of these are a chapter in the book. The book is built around, each shell makes for a different chapter. And so the money cowrie chapter is sort of this epic journey to tell the story of that first global money. So again, in both nature and the human story, I came to see seashells as the world's great fact checkers. Shell middens, of course, rose in North America like temples in the ancient world, like the great cities of shell built by the Calusa more than 1,500 years before the Spanish arrived in Southwest Florida. Some early scientists and historians considered them, these mounds, the mere garbage heaps of nomadic people, but the shells contoured by long ago hands and girding homes and sanctuaries and public buildings, or buried in ancient shellwork factories, obviously establish major pre-Columbian cities on US soil. So the mounds and the shells make clear that the New World was hardly new, much less settled by bearded men on sailing ships. So I come from Fort Myers in Lee County in Southwest Florida. And when I was a kid, I used to always go to the very cheesy shell factory, and the shell factory stands now. And what amazes me is how little I knew about the Calusa people who came there first. So of course, before there was a shell factory in Fort Myers, there were many, many shell work factories in Fort Myers. And this is the wonderful Gulf of Mexico shell called the lightning whelk. And I'll show you a picture of a living lightning whelk in a little while. But these Calusa tools were all honed from the lightning whelk. So the Calusa hafted a wooden handle through the shell's crown to make a heavy hammer or a sharp axe. They sharpened the outer lip into cutting edges for hollowing out their huge canoes. And they honed lightning whelks into spear points, pounders, perforators, fishing weights, and many other tools. And I think one of the most fascinating stories to me in the Native American pieces of this book is how far Florida seashells and lightning whelks especially were traded to other parts of North America. So particularly to the continent's first great city. If any of you have been to the Mounds at Cahokia outside St. Louis, that's an amazing story. Cahokia rose across the Mississippi River from what's now St. Louis, Missouri, 1,000 years ago. It was home to 20,000 to 30,000 people in its day. And its temple mounds, such as this one called Monk's Mound, which is one of the few still standing, had a base as large as the Great Pyramids of Egypt. So the people of Cahokia revered marine shells, and the number archaeologists have found there is astonishing. But what's most astonishing to me, again, is that by far the most abundant shell found in the mounds of Cahokia are lightning whelks from the Gulf Coast of Florida. And during the Q&A, if anyone wants to talk more about this, I can tell you more about how they know those shells are from Florida, which is really fascinating science. But I think I'll go through the talk first, and then I'll stop sharing the screen so we can all talk together and leave plenty of time for questions. So, seashells just reveal who we are at all different times in human history, including now. And the story of the wampum, I just want to mention quickly because many people have heard of wampum and wampum belts, and many people think of wampum as money, but Native American people, and of course, wampum is made of shell. It's beads, it's beautiful shell beads. The purple and white beads were made from the North Atlantic channel whelk, and also quahog clams. And so the thing about wampum for Native people is that it was really closer to discourse and language than money. It was almost, these belts were a form of diplomacy, a form of storytelling and memory and diplomacy. The colonists saw these beads being traded and thought of them as money, and in fact started to manufacture wampum themselves and kind of flooded the market with wampum, if you will. But the colonists, when they would observe Native people trading wampum, they would call the small transactions for small amounts of beads mercenary transactions. And the great Swedish naturalist Linnaeus, as he was naming the species of the world and the species coming back on ships, he named the quahog clam Mercenaria after those mercenary transactions. So the clams today, a lot of which we see in restoration projects here in Florida, are called by their scientific name Mercenaria. And I found that kind of thing so fascinating about how colonialism, it is still with us so profoundly and strongly, even in our science. So again, they reveal who we are at different times. I had a lot of fun reporting on the curiosity cabinets of the 17th century Europe, where there was a great love for the tropical seashells and a real shell madness for these beautiful shells that were starting to come in on ships from the Pacific. In some cases, they really revealed excess at that time. People paid a lot of money for them. Kings had entire shell rooms and even entire grottos. The shell during the shell madness in Dutch 17th and 18th century Holland, a seashell could sometimes sell for as much as a painting by Vermeer, because at that time people thought the seashells coming in from the Pacific were rare. They didn't understand that these were made by animals that were alive and well and living under the warm tropical seas. Rembrandt himself, this is one of Rembrandt's more famous etchings. It's called The Shell. It's a beautiful marble cone from his own collection. He too got caught up in the shell madness, and he was trying to live like a debutante or a dilettante, but he had only the money of an artist, and so he actually went into bankruptcy and lost his brick home in Amsterdam, and probably spent too much money on things like tropical seashells and tulip bulbs. In the following century, so in the 19th century, this great shell madness that had spread among royalty in Europe now expanded to the middle class. And it was that era too that began to see the first shell makers like Queen Conchs were starting to be over harvested. So that was in the British colonies, in the Bahamas. Then Queen Conchs were already starting to be suffering, and there's actually some 19th century science talking about that. I just had a story on Queen Conchs come out this week in the ocean magazine Hatchery. If anyone would like to read that story, I can share it in the chat after I'm finished. But a really interesting part of the Queen Conch story is the reason they are called Queen Conchs is that Queen Victoria was absolutely crazy about the conchs. They got very popular in England during Victorian times. She had her own cameo maker on the royal court to carve her cameos from the beautiful pink shells. And another really fascinating thing that happens in England, and I will tell you, I think this is the single favorite story in the book from readers and in terms of people I've heard from. So in late 19th century, well, this guy, Marcus Samuel Jr., the fellow on the left, he opened a small curio shop on the East End of London in the 1830s to sell seashells. So to meet this demand for seashells by the shell madness that was now catching on among the middle class. So now seashells cost less, and people would use them to make crafts just like we do now. Ladies would buy them for still life drawing. His ad said seashells for ladies' work. And so he had the idea to create these little shell encrusted boxes and sell them at beach resorts like in Margate and Brighton. And you can still see, of course, little shell encrusted boxes at seashell shops around the world to this day. That was his idea, and he made his fortune making these little boxes because tourists love to buy them for a holiday souvenir. And he hired like 40 women to make these souvenir boxes in his shop in the East End. Later in the century, in the 1890s, this tiny seashell shop would become the largest oil company in the world. So the amazing story is that his sons in the next generation, so he had been trading those seashells with Japan and other parts of the Far East, and his sons kept up all his trading relationships, and they started to trade more and more goods, started trading through the Suez Canal, and they were trading kerosene with Japan, and they needed a safe way to carry fuel through the Suez Canal. And they developed the first oil tanker. And the first oil tanker was actually called the Murex. It was named after a seashell, and it was the first tanker to carry oil through the Suez Canal. So the poignancy, of course, Shell Oil still names its tankers after seashells. The boat on the right is a modern day oil tanker, also called the Murex. That tanker is carrying liquefied natural gas around the world. But anyway, the great irony of this, there are so many ironies. I wrote another story about this after the book came out, and I had a line, something like, the Shell oil tankers themselves are not big enough to hold the irony. But one of the many ironies here is that this symbol, the Shell company symbol, that scallop, is perhaps the most famous brand in the world. It is a really, successful example of extraordinary marketing. It's such a strong brand that they don't even need to put their name Shell Oil on it. You just know exactly what it is. And the poignancy of that for me is that we don't know the actual animals in the sea, but we definitely know the corporate brand. So I'm doing a little edit for you on this slide so that you can see the actual Murex for which the ships were named. This is an incredible animal that lives in the Mediterranean and nearby. It was the animal that, when crushed, made the purple dye that the Phoenicians used. The Phoenicians developed the color purple that was used for royalty in their time, and it came from this animal, the Murex. This is a mother Murex laying her eggs, and marine mollusk eggs are just amazing things. So again, the point is that over all these centuries, really, other than shellfish for food, we paid little heed to the animals that build the shells, the marine mollusks. So even in my childhood, and this was my childhood seashell book, many shell books revealed little about the animals themselves and their biological history. They were really descriptive about how to kill the mollusks inside to get at the beautiful shell. So this page I'm showing you in my childhood shell book had descriptions for how to boil or freeze or dig out their soft bodies with an ice pick, which is very macabre. But the good thing about this is to see how ethics change over time, and to see how we treat marine animals now. At least most beachgoers, I think, are pretty ethical about leaving living animals on the shore. Beach motels, also in my childhood, beach motels had boiling pots for killing the animals and cleaning their shells. One joke had that the best place to find seashells in Florida was at the Georgia border, because that's when tourist car trunks started to stink, and they would dump all the seashells on the side of the road. But of course, these are animals that they're just incredible. They're just incredible animals. At left is the horse conch, which is Florida's state seashell. And if you will ask me about the horse conchs in the Q&A, I just had a National Geographic story about horse conchs, and there is some important news about them, which is that if we don't stop their harvest, they probably will be lost. Anyway, it's an incredible animal. If you've seen one on the shore, this incredible orange foot on the right is eating a fellow mollusk. That horse conch is eating a lightning whelk, which is they're just amazing apex predators. And of course, they're animals that swim. See if I can get the scallop to swim for you. I love the way they swim. They swim like little cartoon animals, and crawl and burrow down in the sand and flip somersaults and look at you with curious eyes. They're also really incredible architects that build their shells with minerals from the surrounding sea. Primarily calcium carbonate. They put down layers as they grow. And so their reliance on these minerals makes them sentinels for what's happening to the oceans now. The oceans have absorbed nearly a third of the extra carbon dioxide that humans have sent into the atmosphere since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, making them a third more acidic. Then since that time, they've also taken up more than 90% of the resulting heat trapping gases that are blanketing the earth. So these changes, again, are invisible to our eyes, but seashells are showing us what is happening, just as they once revealed facts about geologic change and evolution. So too much carbon dioxide in the seawater can create, reduces pH and the carbonate concentration, essentially making it hard for marine mollusks to build their shells. This is a phenomenon called ocean acidification, and it makes it harder for them to take up these minerals. The phenomenon was first seen in sea butterflies or pteropods about a dozen years ago. Scientists all around the world began to see that pteropod shells were weakening and becoming pockmarked. And now that is happening to some other shelled animals as well, including farm-raised shellfish that are terribly important for aquaculture. At the same time, some parts of the ocean are becoming too warm for mollusks. So at left is a giant clam bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef. At right is a scene from last summer's Great Heat Dome in the Pacific Northwest. You will remember that killed a couple of hundred people. It killed many millions of shellfish, these particularly being mussels that are partially out in the sun and partially under the water, and they were just absolutely cooked on the shore. Scallops, of course, which have been so important through human history, from the sloop of Aphrodite to the story of St. James in the Bible, they are particularly sensitive to heat. And those scallops in the Northeast that are relied on for commercial scallop harvest, when the commercial fishers have gone out for the past couple of falls, they have found the scallops largely dead as a result of warming. And I can't tell you all these stories without showing you a scallop from your own part of the world and mine. Florida's Big Bend still has healthy populations of seagrasses and scallops. This photograph was taken in the Big Bend by my friend John Moran, who I think many of you know. And this scallop to me really represents everything that could be. When you read the national stories about the manatees starving and the seagrasses dying, you don't often hear that part about the Big Bend and what remains there, and the healthy seagrasses there, and the healthy animals there, and the reasons behind that, having to do with the extraordinary conservation of land in that area and the relative lack of pollution running off the land into the seagrasses, and the relative lack of construction and alteration to the coast, all of which are compounding the harm to seagrasses in every other part of the state. So I really try hard as a science writer and an environmental writer to balance warning with wonder. I think the scientific wonder is crucially important for keeping people excited and involved, and these stories of human ingenuity and just the incredible exuberance of the natural world that you can see in this scallop picture are very important to to my work and the work of those of you at Friends of Wakulla and everyone else who is, trying to help tell the story of what's happening to the earth and its life. So in the third part of the book, in the latter part of the book, I travel around the world with some great scientists who are working on solutions. In this case, in the case of this book, all spinning off the world of seashells and marine mollusks. This is the biophysicist Alison Sweeney. I traveled with her to Palau. She is working on biofuel technologies that might be inspired by the way algae organize themselves in giant clams. So a giant clam is essentially a giant biofuel reactor and solar reactor, and it organizes these pillars inside in such a way that algae and sunlight are kind of perfectly positioned to draw in maximum energy. So she and engineers who are working on new alternative fuel technologies are looking to nature to inspire solutions. So biomimicry. Aquaculture is another important solution that involves not only feeding the world, but helping support fishers who are who are marginalized and impoverished in many parts of the world. So in this slide, I'm showing you another scientist, the Queen Conch scientist, Megan Davis, in the foreground, has a dream to build a Queen Conch hatchery on every island in the Caribbean. And the neat thing she's doing, and I just wrote a story about this that I can share with you, kind of a longer story than I was able to do in the book. The neat thing she's doing is training the fishers and the communities to run these hatcheries themselves so that the fishers could actually make more money collecting Queen Conch eggs and growing conchs than they could from harvesting wild conchs. So these are just, no one thing will be the solution, giving the complexity of harm to the oceans and to the world. But it's really important to, build together solutions and to find best practices that inspire us, even in places as small as Puerto Rico, where this hatchery is. Then the last scientist I want to show you is Mandy Halford. She works on, she's a biochemist who works on using the toxic venom in marine mollusks, such as terebrids, which is the species she's got in her hand. She identifies toxins that could be used in cancer treatments and other kind of treatments, pharmaceutical treatments. But the really important and inspiring thing about her is that she is forging a new field and specialization called science diplomacy that trains young scientists. As they train in their science, they also train to be able to be there at the diplomatic table and at the political table, trying to help elected officials and policymakers work through solutions. So in the end, I hope readers come away with a sense of our oceans as the source of life and solutions to sustain it, and not just the pretty outside. And I am going to stop there. I do have a few more slides in case anybody asks me certain questions, but I think I'm going to stop there and take your questions. I will, I see a couple. Your passion for shells and the cultures behind them is very evident. These creatures have personality. Thank you, Karen and Emily. And Anonymous asks, when will the horse conch article for National Geographic be published? It's published, and I'm going to put it in the chat. And then Renee asks, you discussed generational memory as it relates to our connection to the sea. Wondering about your thoughts on genetic memory as it relates to the same topic. Renee, you may know more about this than I do. I feel sure you do, but it strikes me that genetic memory is terribly important, and all the time we're learning how much more important it is than we realize. So I feel sure that this is imprinted, that it's imprinted upon us, that we still hold that memory from our earliest ancestors. So
I feel the same too on that. You can't help it. It's part of our makeup, and that's one of the draws I think we have to the ocean and to this topic.
yes. So someone is asking about how to acquire the book, and I'm just going to tell you really fast. I'm going to answer that question quickly and tell you about the book signing, and then let's have more questions. So the book is available at Midtown Reader in Tallahassee, but they're not signed because they didn't have any in stock when I was there for Word of South earlier this month. So if anyone in the audience here would like to get the book on Amazon or your favorite bookseller online or Midtown Reader or anywhere else you are, what I'm going to do, I had these beautiful book plates made. I don't know if you can see them, but the illustrator who illustrated The Sound of the Sea, every chapter, as I mentioned, is about a different shell, and it has gorgeous illustrations. So I got book plates made to match the color of the interior of the book, and they look really nice on the front, you know, when you open the first page. So anyone who would like a book plate, you can email me your address and be sure to tell me to whom you'd like the plate written out to, because for some people it might be a Mother's Day gift, or for someone else, or if it's for you, send me an email, give me your snail mail address, haha, and tell me to whom you'd like the book plate written, and I will pop it in the mail to you. It's very easy for me. And in fact, it only takes one regular stamp, and I love doing it because it's been a little painful to have so many book events move to Zoom. And when I sit at my kitchen table and physically write to you and sign my name, it makes me feel close to you. And then putting an envelope in the mail, it is very, you know, it is a good feeling, and it connects us in a way that we can't usually feel connected on Zoom. So there's my email address. And again, send me an email and I will get your plate off to you. I'm now going to put in the link to my horse conch article in National Geographic that came out earlier this month. And I'm just going to share my screen again quickly.
Chat. Cynthia, you muted yourself.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't want to miss anything.
I was trying to show you the National Geographic article. I'm going to try it one more time, but I don't want to spend your time with me trying to figure out the way too many tabs that I have open on my screen. Yeah, I can't, let's see, there it is. Okay, you're seeing an advertisement, which I'm trying to, okay, can you see the horse conch now?
Yeah, I do see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the story that came out in National Geographic a couple of weeks ago. The horse conch is Florida's state seashell. The legislature, shoot, is the screen sharing paused? Can you see this?
I do see the screen, and I'm double checking with my colleague. Do you see the screen? Yes, we see the screen.
Okay, great. I have a big warning that says your screen sharing has been paused, but as long as you can see it, that's all that matters. So anyway, the horse conch is Florida's state seashell. The legislature designated it in 1969. It is a huge shell. It can grow up to 2 feet in length. It is beloved. I'm going to show you some historic pictures of a young boy collecting a seashell half his size on Sanibel Island. The reason I wrote this story is that a new study has just come out showing that horse conchs are much more imperiled than scientists realize. They live much shorter lives, and the females spawn much later in life than scientists realized, and they are very close to being lost. People can't see my email address. I'm going to post it.
I was going to ask if I can grab it and repost it for you. If you can just keep talking, I'll do that for you.
I see everyone didn't get that. It was only the hosts. So now there it is again. I think I've given it to everyone now. Woo, it's hard.
We got it. We got it.
Hard to keep all this stuff going at the same time. Anyway, these animals are extraordinary. You saw that huge orange animal eating the lightning whelk, and they're the biggest shells in the Northern Hemisphere. They are iconically Florida, and they are being over collected to death. There is no limit on collecting horse conchs in Florida, either commercial or recreational. And the commercial fishers can get $100 or $200 for that shell. You can find them online selling for $200 because they're so special. So hopefully, I really hope that article makes a difference, because when you think about our iconic species, our state mammal, the manatee is starving. The state marine mammal, the manatee, is starving. The state mammal, the state panther, is on the verge of extinction. The state tree, the sable palm, is imperiled. It's dying on the coast because of sea rise, saltwater intrusion, and it's also dying inland because of an invasive pest. As we let all of our iconic Florida symbols die, it is a symbol of who we are if we allow that to happen. And so I hope that article makes a difference for helping save the horse conchs.
That's very powerful. That's extremely powerful, Cynthia. I mean, wow. We have a lot of thank yous that are coming in, but there's some questions on the Q&A component that we may want to address.
Yeah, so I'm going into the Q&A now.
Mm-hmm.
Generational, yeah.
How
do we know the lightning whelks are from Florida? This was a fantastic study, and also shows the value of museum collections. An archaeologist named Laura Kozak, who used to be at the Florida Museum of Natural History, and then was up in Cahokia with the U.S. Geological Survey. She used lightning whelks from museum collections to figure out that lightning whelks from different parts of the sea have slightly different spires. So the pointy top is built slightly differently depending on whether the animal lived in the Gulf of Mexico, the Eastern Gulf, the Western Gulf, the Atlantic, and so on. And she painstakingly measured, hundreds of lightning whelks in museum collections to come up with the patterns of where they come from. And then she went through seashells and parts of seashells from the Mounds of Cahokia to track where the ancient lightning whelks came from. She tracked almost all the lightning whelks in the Mounds of Cahokia to Florida's Gulf of Mexico. Just amazing.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing.
What is our best approach to get the limpkins reestablished at Wakulla via an apple snail introduction spawning program? Is it possible? Who can answer this very, very specific question other than me? Because I don't know about limpkins in Wakulla.
The apple snail, I'm not well versed on it, but the apple snails have pretty much vanished. The native apple snails and the limpkins were the main feeders. That was their main diet, was the apple snail. So there's a lot of conjecture.
Have they been displaced by pollution or by an invasive snail?
There is the Asian apple snail, I believe. I think it's the Asian apple snail has come in, and that's part of it. And I'm not well versed enough to be able to tell you the complete answer, but the apple snail population did crash, the native apple snail, and as a result, the limpkins moved elsewhere for their food. So they probably are a very good indicator of water quality. So, which I wanted to ask a question. I don't want to bump our audience's questions, but you alluded.
I believe we've got through those. I just scrolled through. I think we've answered all the audience questions. So do let us know if you haven't had your questions answered, or put a new one in if you'd like one answered.
You touched briefly on the aquaculture as an option, but I was wondering if you wanted to go a little more in depth on that, as far as, the balance of using our bivalves for cleaning. Of course, they're very good at that. And then I know oysters aren't necessarily mollusk, but they do have shells, and they're very popular in this part of the country, and water quality, and perhaps if you did any research on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So oysters are super important marine mollusks. This was a really difficult book to tackle and to organize because there are so many iconic marine mollusks. And I had to make a decision at one point, and did make a decision to narrow it down to seashells, as we think of these gorgeous.
Sure, you had to go from here and you had to bring it down. Sure.
Queen conchs and the cowries and the spiral nautilus and so on. Other people, including Mark Kurlansky, wrote a wonderful book about oysters, and other people have written entire books about oysters. My friend Bruce Ritchie has been working for a couple of years on a book about oysters. So I didn't include a chapter about oysters, but I've done a lot of research on oysters and the Apalachicola. And you're absolutely right, Renee. Oysters and shellfish generally, Florida's native shellfish. So oysters, clams, scallops, those shellfish that the native people ate, and that just as importantly, served as these huge and great storm barriers all throughout the Gulf. There were these extraordinary large shoals that were poking out of the Gulf of Mexico. You can read about these incredible structures in the diaries of the Spanish conquistadors, right? These were huge oyster beds. And it's really important to restore them and get them back, because they were doing much more than feeding people. They were keeping the water clean, as you say. The filter feeding shellfish are some of the most important, workhorses for keeping water clean. Scientists call them the liver of our rivers because they keep water clean. It's what they do. They can cycle an incredible amount of water and clean it up. And the profound loss of not only oysters, but again, clams, scallops, so many shellfish that just, it's hard to imagine or to express the density and the just the breadth of life in the Gulf and in the Atlantic at at conquest. And those are all really important parts of resilience and all the things we need to do now to help protect Florida and the sea from changing climates. Nina is saying oysters have been seeded in the Chesapeake Bay and are helping clean the bay too. Absolutely, the bay has been such a model for the cleanup of nutrient pollution, and including on oyster restoration, for sure.
And I see another mention of New York Harbor. And to circle back to our local Olympians, it looks like there was also a variation in water level that helped the demise of the apple snails. So, and I see another question came in from Pamela about conchs that are endangered, and let's see, are the conchs that are endangered those that are being eaten in salads and conch fritters? Would you like to respond to that?
I would, and I'm going to drop another story. Now, just because I'm dropping my stories in the chat, I hope you will still read the book because I do have a whole chapter about Queen Conch. So the story that just came out this week in Hatchery is the one I just put in the chat. This is all about the new Queen Conch hatchery in Puerto Rico. And this, the beautiful story is that the fishers are running the hatchery. So instead of going out and harvesting queen conchs, collecting wild conchs, they'll go out and collect just part of the eggs when a mother conch is laying eggs, bring them back to the hatchery and grow them that way. Yes, Pamela, these queen conchs are the conchs that make conch chowder, conch fritters, conch everything. And I write about all those conch foods in the Queen Conch chapter. You may know that the Keys, the Florida Keys, are called the Conch Republic. The people who are from the Keys are known as conchs, and yet there is no viable population of queen conchs left in the Florida Keys.
Wow.
Florida overfished its conchs by the 1970s. They were protected from commercial harvest as of the 70s. That was too late. They were protected from recreational harvest as of the 80s. That was too late. They have never come back despite 40-year ban on harvesting queen conchs in Florida. So now if you eat conch chowder, conch fritters, conch whatever in the Keys, it is coming from the Bahamas. And now those conchs in the Bahamas are just as imperiled, and scientists believe that the Bahamas is also going to lose its conch population. So this is a really serious issue. These are such iconic animals. They're so many people's favorite shell. And this fishery, the Bahamas fishery, is the largest conch fishery. I think there are 10,000 conch fishers in the Bahamas, and they rely on this industry. It's like the oystermen in Apalachicola. This is a group of people who rely on this resource for their livelihood. But if it becomes overfished, they're going to lose their livelihood altogether. And that is definitely what's happening in the Bahamas now. The Bahamas is following the Florida story.
So how long does it take from egg to harvest size for the operation, the aquaculture operation? What's the growth rate on that?
It'll be about 4 years until they're adult.
4 years. That's an investment. Yeah.
Get up and running. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I can't believe it. We're to the end of our hour, Cynthia. It has absolutely flown by for me, and thank you for such a great presentation.
You're so welcome. It was so nice to see you all, and I love Friends of Wakulla Springs. You have all been so supportive of my work over the years, and now I know you've been talking to one of my students about her story. So I feel this too is generational, that you're now helping the next upcoming generation of environmental journalists, and I just love that. So thank you so much. And
Oh, you
every,
bet.
everyone has my email address. Please email. Don't forget, not only do I need your address, but I need to whom you would like the book inscribed to. And if you like the book, I hope you'll leave a review on Amazon. You don't even have to leave your name or a review. You can just put a star rating. That helps. And just thank you for everything. This group has been incredibly supportive for a very long time, and I really appreciate you. This group had me really early in my author career, so I appreciate that very much and wish you the best in your important work.
Well, we wish you the best and want you to continue with your work, and we will support it as long as you keep writing, okay?
Thank you
And
again.
definitely, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. The presentation was absolutely wonderful. This is a close of our spring speaker series. But please, we will keep you updated when we have a new event on the schedule. Always remember to please donate to the friends and please join if you're not a member. Everyone, good night and stay safe. Okay. Good night.
Thanks again. Good night.